What is up? This is going to be the first review for YouTube. It's kind of exciting. Maybe not for everybody. I get it. But the method behind it is going to be a little different than most times you see anything on YouTube. You see a bunch of different clips kind of cut together, different gameplay bits. But I think the way I want to go about it is just showing raw gameplay footage without it being cut, right? And I don't want to start jumping all over the place in the game, showing different gameplay bits, because I think it is a lot of the time spoiler territory. I can't talk. But that's the cool thing at the same time is it still gives an opportunity to show said raw footage, it uncut, see how the game's running live and just showing off the graphics and just what's going on in the moment. And of course, I'm going to be cutting the audio just from that aspect because things are going to be said, right, that I think is going to be a genuine surprise to people. And I think going forward, that's kind of how I'm just going to keep doing those reviews if I still go in this format, right? But I digress. So this first review, of course, as you understand and can see, right, we're talking about God of War Ragnarok. I'm still coming off of like a 20-hour straight play sesh just a couple days ago. The last few days, when I do say do some of these streams to where I'm playing for 20, 24 hours, whatever it may be, it takes a lot to recuperate after the fact. So this game's no different compared to when I did it for MW2 a couple weeks ago. That one might have been more rough, but I think this one, the reason why it hit so hard for me and why I'm still kind of exhausted, there's a lot of great emotional story beats to this game. And I'll delve into some of them, but it's like any other review that you'll see. Almost every single one of these people are going to be saying, oh, we don't want to talk too much about the story. There's genuine surprises. And 9 times out of 10, it's everybody's having the same idea on a topic, right? Then it's probably true, right? But you don't know that until you actually play the game. And I'll tell you what, with this game, I 100% believe everything they were saying with the reviews, and that doesn't happen too often. But with said review, I want to break it up into 3 different things, right? 1 being gameplay, 2 graphics, 3 story. And of course, at the end of it, which won't be a different segment, right? It'll just be the final verdict, what everybody does. But you jump straight into the gameplay, right? The gameplay, of course, very similar to what we just had in 2018's version. It was the revamped system for Kratos and how he approaches combat. Then before, it was more arcade style, button mashing, all that good stuff. This kind of holds on to some of those basics, but I think expands upon it, and you have to be more strategic in what you do. I'd say, though, with the gameplay, they add some unique elements to it, and that's kind of the stuff that you'll see in different reviews and what you'll hear right now. It's hard to get into that stuff without spoiling things, because there are genuine surprises. If you don't know anything about this game and you want to go into it completely blind, I promise you, you're going to be surprised by a lot of the stuff, and that goes into some of these categories. So with gameplay, there are some genuine surprises, whether it be just with Kratos or possibly other people. Who knows? But that's as much as I'll say on that. But they add some unique things like the grapple hook with the Blades of Chaos. You can kind of climb up to higher reaches now. They add, I say, more interactivity with your partner, Atreus, right? He has more things to do with these arrows and whatnot, different variations of arrows. You don't get to see, from my understanding, there's no fire or ice arrows from what he had before. And correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that was a huge part of the last game. Maybe some other things as well. But here they add 2 different new elements to these arrows. It's very unique and cool what they do with the gameplay environment, because it's like with 2018. It's how you unlock very specific areas, how you unlock different puzzles, whatever it may be. You get these arrows and whatnot. And then as we get to the only thing that's somewhat spoilery is going to be right here, right? I wanted to really showcase this moment in particular because it's such an impacting moment, and Of course, it is one thing that you don't see coming, right? But it is within the first 30 minutes, so I don't think that's giving away too much because there's so many other things throughout the game that'll catch you off guard. But this moment in particular, I think it's going to hit home immediately for a lot of people, and you'll see some reviews saying they were emotional within the first 10, 20 minutes, right? And I think most people that have had animals and whatnot, they have gone through something like this, right? Loss. And loss is going to be a huge aspect to this game, and that was another reason why I wanted to showcase this moment, because right here in this moment is where they convince you, and you don't understand it at first, but this is where they convince you like this whole game is going to be similar to this right here, and the metaphor that they're trying to show between not only just the dog and Atreus and their relationship, but the way I viewed it, it was symbolic to how Kratos feels with Atreus, and maybe the other way around, right? Atreus feels to Kratos like this is an older being, right? They will pass on at some point, and that's why I like this moment, because Kratos can see with Atreus, like maybe Atreus is going to feel that way towards him one day. Maybe that's what he wants. And then Atreus knows, maybe deep down, they don't delve into this too much, but this might be a thing where Atreus feels the same way towards Kratos. He might lose him at some point, right? But that's the only thing I really wanted to include, because I think this is the biggest moment of the game, and it kind of flew under everybody's radars as they played the game, as it did with me. I didn't understand it till the end of the game, and I really went back and thought through all my, different theories that I've had before the game, during the game, and I think this was the moment where it changed everything. But outside of just the gameplay, right, I'm going to go straight into the next topic, is graphics. As you can see in this moment, right, the graphics are ridiculous. And the crazy thing about the graphics is it doesn't even run 100% to the PS5's capabilities. And this is what I'm playing on, of course, is a PS5, right? It does, I think, utilize it to a good strength, but as you'll know, and you'll read articles and whatnot, even the company, the developer rather, Sony Santa Monica, they even said themselves the main priority was to make sure this game ran really good on a PS4. And in saying that, it is on a PS4, right? And I think that came to a surprise to a lot of people. Why would you put this game on a PS4 as well? We got PS5s now. That's kind of the general public's idea behind it, right? Is why would we want a game that's being played on the PS4 as well? It's going to be taking back some of the capabilities of what the system, say PS5, can really do. But you got to think, it's a company, right? Not even just Sony Santa Monica, but just Sony in general, right? The PlayStation division over there. The first game, the 2018 version, of course, I'm going to be saying that quite a bit, but the cool thing about that game is, right, it sold so many copies. And the last time I checked, I don't have the exact number, but I know it was over 20 million copies just for a PS4. So when making a sequel to this game, you have to think as a company and money-wise. Do you really just want it on one system when you have two systems? And especially, you can't just make it for a PS5, right? Because not everybody has PS5s. Once the pandemic hit, of course, and this is a story that's always been told since the beginning of this pandemic, and those things are very hard to come by. And they're starting now to come out more regularly, but it's not a 100% common thing like it was when PS4s first launched. You could find a PS4 anywhere you went. And if they were sold out for like a week or two, they'd come in immediately. But if these PS5s are gone from store shelves, they can be gone for months and months. So as a business, to go back to that, right, you have to put them out on both, because a lot of people might have PS5s, but more people have PS4s right now. And it was a genius decision, I think, to do it, because at the same time, you still showcase why the PS4 is still a powerhouse. 1, 2, you're still going to sell a bunch of units on a PS4. 3, you're going to showcase at least, a hefty portion of what the PS5 could possibly do. And that's how I see this game in general. I feel like this game on a PS5 is more of a tech demo, I'd say, for PS5, because I know for sure it looks great. You can play the game in 120 frames per second, which That's what I captured all this footage in. And it didn't skip a beat. I checked my TV multiple times, and I was making sure, like, if is it like going off and on quite a bit? Is it dipping, to under 100? But I've never had those issues. I don't remember even one time where I looked at the screen and it was a frame rate dip. And it probably did, right? I played the game for like 20 hours straight, so I'm sure it did. I just didn't notice at some points. But it's incredible what they're able to accomplish here, right? And I know going forward into the future, whatever direction they go next with this series will be 100% for a PS5 at that point, right? Because I think this is the last straw for a PS4 and the capabilities of what it can do. I don't know anything else that this thing could possibly do. And I'll tell you what, I'm impressed, right? And like I say, I can go on over and over and over again about how great these graphics are. But if you have a really nice TV, I'd recommend playing on the biggest screen possible. Try to play in the 120 frames. Get that HDR on. You got amazing colors. There's even some sequences where I captured footage for it, but I don't want to show it because, like I said, I feel like it just genuinely shows too much. But it's the best looking game, I think, this year. I'll be honest. The only other thing that came close to was Horizon 2, I think. But with Horizon 2, I had a lot of issues with just graphics and whatnot. Frame rates, all that stuff. I had a lot of issues. And that's something I might want to revisit at some point. But that's a topic for another time. With this, it's incredible. And, of course, like I said, you got to play on the biggest screen possible. So, in moving over to the next thing, right? I think it's going to be all about the story for the rest of the time that I talk. But I'm going to keep it very brief because as much as I want to say about it, I can't say too much about it because I feel like it gives away too much. And it sucks because, of course, the first instinct is like, oh, this moment, and just want to start talking about it. But this game, more than even maybe 28 version, or 2018's version, rather, I think this game might have bigger surprises. But before we get to, say, the pros of the games, right, let's just go straight into the cons so we can get some of that stuff out of the way. One of my biggest issues with the story, I believe there's a few sections, not just one, I think at least three sections in the game where I thought the pacing was really bad. And not to a point to where, oh my god, this game is going to get ruined by this pacing, right? It was just over-the-top exposition, thrown in random information that I didn't think mattered too much, which I'll expand a little bit more on that in the pros, right? But there were some sections that were a little too much. And the most annoying part about these sections where it was dragging on too much was mainly, oh, we got to get to this point, right? We get to this point. Oh, no, there's something else to do. Let's do that. And then, oh, no, we got to go to this point now. And then this point. And there was one section in particular that I won't talk about too much, but you do that at least 4 or 5 times where you're trying to catch up to something. And it just keeps happening and happening and happening. And I'm like, dude, what are we doing? Can we just get to the point already? Like, I can see why you drag it out 2 times, maybe. Like, oh, we didn't get it this time. Let's try it again. Okay, we didn't get it that time. But the third time, boom, we got it. But you do it at least 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, we got to get on with this show, dude. Like, let's get the story rolling. Because it grinds that story to a halt. And I can see why maybe they want to drag it out a little bit more. They want the game to be filled with so much information, and they want to be filled with so many eyes looking all over the place, right? Because the graphics are crazy, kind of like I was saying before, right? And there is a bunch of different things to look at throughout the world. But I think tighten that up next time. Next story of whatever you guys do with this franchise, make sure it doesn't have to get dragged out that far. Like, I don't need a 30-hour game, right? If we're just getting straight to the point on some things and we know what's up, that's fine, dude. I'm cool. But yeah, that just keep going and going. It's just a little annoying. So it happened to me at least, like I said, about 3 times, maybe 4 that I can remember. But outside of that, as far as the cons, that was my only issue. Because going straight into the pros now, everything else is great. The characters, um, the writing, right? Which, there's some pacing issues, but the writing itself, when it's picking up, saying these cutscenes, right? There wasn't one cutscene, I think, in the game where I was sitting there like, oh, that's kind of dumb. Like, why would you go with that story beat? Or why would you write that for that character? Everybody was written perfectly for that character, right? Everybody sounded like themselves. It didn't sound like they're going out of their ways to try to be something else that they weren't. They really expanded upon what we loved about these characters in the first game. Brock, Sindri, Kratos, Atreus, and the hint of Thor and Odin in the background, foreshadowing the whole story in 2018, and even Freya and whatnot. Her, and I'm sure I'm missing some people. Mimir's another one, right? All these people, they just they grew naturally, with the years, right? And they were getting ready for Fimbulwinter and whatnot, and now you see where Ragnarok's gonna go down at some point. They're trying to prepare for Ragnarok. And even, going into the story now with these new characters that we officially get to see and talk to and interact with, say Odin and Thor, and there's some other people I won't say, outside of Tyr's another one. Tyr's a good one. And then there's some secondary characters that they try to introduce that I wasn't a big fan of. I'm forgetting the names. There's one with a squirrel. He has one eye, I think. He was a little annoying, and then there was another dude that was a dwarf, and he had an octopus on his shoulder sometimes. He seemed like a little rat. I didn't like that guy too much. But like I said, these new additions of Thor and Odin, the genius behind these characters is they don't have to show these guys too often. But they leave so much tension in the air with all these other characters that you always feel their presence even when they're not there. And I think that's genius writing, and it was beautiful exposition. That's the perfect way to do it, is adding information in there where, say, something else isn't there, right? And they mastered that. But going past that, the story itself, right? The story was amazing when I got done with it. And what I mean by that is, and these are kind of touching upon the points of the pros and cons. So with the cons of what I was saying, the pacing, right, there are some areas where it was dragging on too much. Maybe a little bit too much information that didn't seem necessary. That piece right there, the information that didn't seem necessary. By the end of this game, tying it back into how I felt overall with the story, all those moments, mainly there's a section with Atreus and Angerboden, which that's another character I love, Angerboden's amazing. And they have a whole section in a different realm, right? I won't say too much past that. But that whole section was, some people I've talked to, it took them 3 hours to get through that section. It took a couple hours, maybe 4 hours, from different people that I've had conversations with. And it's such a drag in some of those areas. And it was the first time where I felt the same way with the pacing of, why is there so much going on? But going back to how I felt with the story, I think by the end of this story of what they're trying to convey with your emotions, all that stuff made sense. All the information that they were throwing at you. And what it was really a part of was people's journeys, right? Atreus in particular, for the example that I gave with Angerboden and the realm that they were at. He was on a journey of self-discovery the entire game, is what I'll say. And he's trying to understand his purpose and trying to understand the prophecy that was laid out before him and Kratos in 2018's version, right? I won't say much past that point, but that was his whole journey. And him having that journey, talking to certain people and them trying to figure out some things, and by the end of the game, you completely understand what the story was trying to tell you, what these writers were trying to tell you, what the director was trying to convey with his emotions behind this, right? And you don't just get that same reaction from Atreus, without me getting into spoilers. There's other characters that you don't see coming, where they bring full circle moments to you, and they convey emotions out of some characters that you didn't see coming at all. And I thought it was a really beautiful way to get in touch with some of these characters that I didn't think would be a thing. I didn't think you'd get, hand in hand with some of these guys and be like, oh my god, like this is such beauty coming out of this person, and I didn't think this was even possible for them. Like maybe they were too irredeemable, right? But they give them that chance to shine, and they give them that chance to understand what their purpose is and what they were meant to be and who they were destined to be, right? That's all I'll say. I don't want to say anything else. I know a lot of this might sound like I've been rambling and whatnot, but I wanted to make sure that I can give a genuine reaction to something that gave me a lot of emotion without giving away too much, so you can have a same similar experience, so you can have that shared emotion. A lot of the time when you read reviews, watch reviews, I think what gets me ticked off after I experience that thing that I'm looking into that I want to enjoy is that reviewer, they'll kind of go over the top and hype something up really high, right? Like, oh, this game's amazing, it's a masterpiece, this is why, boom, 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 start rattling off a bunch of different information. So you're immediately going into that set experience with the expectations of, oh my god, it's going to be a masterpiece, I'm going to love this. And it's happened to me more often than not, surprisingly, that I don't end up liking it as much because I give myself unrealistic expectations for the game, but that's based off of what I've read about it. So it's like the reviewer wants me to have that same reaction, but I can't have that same reaction because I read about it already, and then it's like I'm expecting some big things that I've never seen before. And of course, we consume so much media, whether it's movies or the video games with stories now, that there's not a lot of things you could do without retreading ground that we've seen before to make it seem fresh and new, and it's going to surprise us genuinely. So watching these reviews, and I'm very glad the biggest piece that people gave away was like, it's a masterpiece, right? And that's not an easy thing to say, because what's really a masterpiece? You know, not everything is perfect, right? So I don't know if you can even say anything's a masterpiece, right? But what I'll say with 100% confidence, I'll say these reviewers were right. They can't talk too much about the game. There's a lot of stuff that's very surprising and revealing, and you can't give it away. And 1,000% I will agree with them that God of War Ragnarok is a masterpiece, or as close as a masterpiece as you could possibly get. And not only that it's because of, you know, this world that they built, but there's other elements that play into that. One, it being a sequel, right? It's almost impossible for you to start off with one game that's amazing and great, a masterpiece, right? God of War 2018. And then you to follow that up and make it just as good, right? That's impossible right there. But to make it better is something you don't see too often. A lot of people will say different things of like The Last of Us Part 2, maybe Horizon 2, which I don't agree that those games are masterpieces by any means. I think a lot of people agree, at least with the Horizon standpoint, that that's not a masterpiece. Beautiful looking game, whatever. I can go into it some other time. Last of Us Part 2, there was quite a bit of people that thought it was a masterpiece. I don't agree with that at all. I still think it's a good game, and that's fine. At the end of the day, I don't think Naughty Dog's going to lose any sleep about my reaction to it, and I still think those guys are gods over there, and I'm going to play anything they ever put out for the end of time, because I think they're genuinely the top dogs in the industry until now. I think what Sony Santa Monica did with God of War Ragnarok and their clear vision of what the series should be going forward, I do not think they're going to go and retread the same ground of what we've seen with the arcadey style back with PS3, PS2, you know, with those earlier games. This is what God of War is going to look like for the future, and who knows? But the common thing of this game is history repeating itself and us making our own legacies, right? This God of War and what they've done with the gameplay and combat, everything, right? Story beats, whatever it may be. This could be a thing where they stop their own cycle. There's no more arcadey style God of War. There's no simple storytelling, which I think, you know, the first few games were. There were some great, you know, beats in those games for sure, but a lot of it was just heavy on gameplay, I think. Where here, they're heavy on a goddamn story because they have the best writers around. And they broke the cycle. As you'll see in this game, it's all about breaking a cycle. and creating our own legacy, right? So, in conclusion, like I said, the game is as close as a masterpiece as you could possibly get. But more importantly, you have to play this game, buy it full price, collector's edition, whatever you can find, just grab it and play it. If for whatever reason you haven't played the 2018 version, you're kind of just coming into it thinking like, oh, do I need to play that? I mean, of course, I would say you have to, right? But even if you're like, I don't have time for it, whatever, people are busy with stuff all the time. I'd say, they have a good little God of War recap in the very beginning of the main screen of this game. You'll see it right there. And you can just catch up right there and then boom, go straight into it. Let's go. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. My first review for a game kind of getting uploaded to YouTube. A little weird, different, but I like it, man. It's my little test at it and a little crack. Kind of see where it could possibly go in the future. But of course, we're going to put this out there in the world, get some feedback, and make it better for next time. And I'm glad I got to experience this game, and I hope you are glad when you experience this game.
I don't know if we are breaking fate, or fate's breaking us.